Hey y'all, Game Methuselah. I'll show you something that I often use when I do various goblin attacks and the like. And that's something that was done really well in 3.5, but I think has sort of fallen off a little bit since 4th edition provided all the creatures for you, and in 5th edition most people are sort of staying with the monster manuals and the like. And that's sort of modifying and making your own monsters. 3.5 used to have templates. You would put a vampire template onto some creature if you wanted, or some other template that would, a were template. Could be anything. And that would modify the character so that you would have something else and make it really unique and your own. That was something that I thought was really good in 3.5. You might even take a look at it, maybe be able to apply it into 5th edition, have some use for it. It lended to the problem that 3.5 had, was that it increased prep time for preparing adventures. 3.5 was brutal for DMs getting games ready. I cannot tell you how many hours and hours and hours and hours I would spend prepping up a 3.5 game. When I look at a 4 or even a 5 game now, I find substantially less time is required to prep games. Other game systems are even easier, but I wanted to bring up what I do, and I know Matt Colville does it, and I'm sure a lot of other game masters are doing it, but they may not necessarily be talking about it. But some people started talking about it lately, and I thought maybe I should do just a quick thing on it. It should take a monster, and then you modify it up to make it special or your own. Now here's a fun one I did up. When a friend of mine ran a monk, I decided that in his school was going to be this ogre monk that somehow was involved, and of course was not a good actor, and was going to be problematic. In one of the newer expansions, they expanded what monks could do, and one of them was this drunken technique, which I found hilarious. So I made an ogre monk. Now, this ogre monk is not particularly great. It's really not much better than any normal monk. In fact, it most likely isn't even as good, but it has a very interesting factor. Ogres are fast. They move 40 feet. You add 10 feet on for being a monk, and an additional 10 feet on if you flurry as a drunken master, and now you have a 60-foot movement. On top of that, when they flurry as a drunken master, they automatically have a free disengage ability, which means that they can move and not draw any attacks of opportunity. You can see where I'm going at. Flur 4 blows, move 60 feet, you could move around from the fighter who's blocking you, punch out the wizard, then move an additional movement around the corner and disappear. It makes for fun and frivolity. Now, I don't necessarily recommend it, but it is fun. I mean, he has no armor class. He has a lot of hit points, but they're fun things to do, and I think you should think about them. Now, my main point was this. In my monster mambo, I always modify up many of the goblins to have specials. I think you might have seen a little standard. I always usually have a priest or a wizard going with the group, plus usually your muscle leader who's theoretically leading the group. So this is what a normal goblin looks like. Pretty standard. I'm sure all of you have seen it in the monster manual. But if you look back in the back of the monster manual, you can see a thing called Acolyte, which is a second-level human priest. No reason he has to be human. Here's my goblin Acolyte. He's one level of goblin, and then he's one level of priest. And you get a really nice little modifiable priest. He's not really devastating, but it adds extra color into your combats and makes them more interesting because these things can do different things. Now, he is the grave domain, which made it interesting, so I gave him Toll of the Dead, which is a good little spell. He starts with False Life already up and active, so that's kind of neat. And then he uses Bane, and he has Cure Wounds. Well, Bane is good because it throws a penalty on multiple players if they can't make their saving throw. So it's all these things that add interest to your combats. And the other thing, especially with wimpy monsters, you don't have to add a lot to a beholder to make a beholder, well, nasty. Even mind flayers, well, they can sort of be interesting on their own. But sometimes when you're running boring creatures, the little simple creatures and stuff, it's always interesting to give them a little extra flavor that can make them fun. And this is what you can do. Just look through your lists, figure out what, a CR modifier, 3 levels of monk. I added 1 CR to the ogre. And an ogre's not a great choice. But again, you can see that it's fun to do, and it can make for an interesting deal. You throw him in with a few other creatures or something else, and it's kind of a unique little item. Maybe he's leading a thieves guild. There's lots of things you can do to make stories. But pick a monster you like that maybe isn't so tough, and then modify it. I mean, a whole passel of Knoll rogues might be really nasty. Things to think about. The second thing I want to do is a small rant, and I hope you'll bear with me on this. One of the people who was responding to my YouTube video said he thought that maybe I just ran combat-oriented games and not story-oriented games, and he wondered if I agreed. And I told him back, and I said, I don't agree. I think that combat is very valuable in role-playing. I think that story is very valuable in role-playing. What I do is drama. Drama is what drives the role-playing for me. I've been playing over 40 years, and if it was just an interesting story, or if it was just combat, well, for combat, there's Warhammer Fantasy, and there's, a billion other games. I could play Star Wars, I could play Vor, you name the miniature system. I could play Bolt Action, I could play historicals. There's tons of things that simulate war. There's tons of really good stories out there. I tell people, if you ever want a really good story, go play Star Wars: The Old Republic, an MMO computer game, and play the Imperial Agent. My friend Don, who's a writer, and myself had to think it had one of the absolute best storylines I've ever seen in a game. It was fabulous. It might have been one of the best storylines I've ever seen in anything. But it isn't necessarily providing drama. When you're playing, you're running a computer game. Yeah, okay, if you fail and you lose, you can always reboot. The thing is, that doesn't always happen in life. And it doesn't always happen in games. There's been a lot of conversation based upon what Matt Mercer did on Critical Role. A character got killed, and a lot of people felt that it was unfair or unreasonable. Now, if you look at Matt Colville's back of his t-shirt, you'll see that the Stone Golem steps on your head to make sure you're dead. Now, that happened when they were very young, playing with a lot of their different game masters, and one of the game masters was very sure that the monsters would make sure that you were finished before the battle happened. That was very common in reality. Most times in battles, people don't go picking up the dead. It's kind of a recent thing. During medieval or anything in the ancients, you walked through with a spear and killed anybody who fell. Now, that's not necessarily nice, and it's not necessarily fair, but medicine may not have been what it was, and maybe that you felt that you were doing them a mercy. But understand, like what I do in trying to produce drama, Matt Mercer's looking to build the drama, build the story, build the content. Same thing Matt Colville does. He's got some vicious at combats, and as do I. I've run some incredibly vicious combats, and I've played in some incredibly vicious combats. The best night of gaming, for me, at least one of them, was after one of my mages was literally obliterated, blown to smithereens and not recoverable under any means. But I wounded horribly, and we were able to defeat him, and it was an epic story in a really epic campaign. And I think that's what people should really and might really want to strive for. I'm sorry if you haven't played these kind of games. They're really exciting. Yeah, sometimes it's really frustrating to have a character you really like die. Matt had that in one of his games very early on with some very new people, and they were upset. But once the guy generated a new character and he came out and started playing it, he was suddenly finding that he liked this new character better. And that happens often. But remember, all the game masters who are really good and putting out games, and I think there's a lot of them out there, substantially more than back in the 70s when I was GMing a lot, there was not a whole lot of feel that you were really saving the day and moving the campaign forward. Seems better now, and I think the content produced by a lot of the companies that make role-playing games have made modules that are substantially better than they were. And appreciate the fact that sometimes the bad guys win. Sometimes horrible things happen to good people. All you have to do is turn on the news half the time, and you see it every day in the world, and maybe people feel like that's what we're trying to avoid. Let's escape that. But I think in role-playing, you have the opportunity to do something you most likely cannot do in life. You get to change it. You get to make sure that the bad guys necessarily don't win. And I'd like to think that can happen in real life, but it can for sure happen in role-playing. So enjoy the games you play. Give a little slack to the game masters who are putting out these good games for you, because I guarantee you they're at the end of the day trying to make a really excellent adventure for everybody to enjoy. And if you guys are spectating, well, enjoy the spectation. It's like going to a movie. A lot of work, effort, time, and energy has gone into making things good. So take these ideas and put them into your own game, and maybe you don't want to be that evil DM, but maybe down the road you might change your mind. In the meantime, keep watching and keep enjoying the games that are out there. I sure will. And keep playing, because I think that's how you move it forward. And comment and talk about things, because the conversation and dialogue helps, just not the negative attitude. So until we meet again, I'll let you guys go. Fight me, devils, fight, for I hate peace. Game on.